Welcome into Between Us and 938 Live, sharing relationship tips that matter to you and also inspiring stories. And today for my guest, Michelle Koay, who's an RGS counsellor. Today, Michelle's going to share a bit more about how women can juggle the various roles they play, whether that's at work or at home, and how to strike a great balance between all these roles. Now, Michelle, great to have you in the studio as always.
Hi, nice to see you again, Angela.
I love that we're talking about the roles that women are playing today, Michelle, because you work very closely with a lot of young girls, girls in their teenage years, for example. And a lot of times with the overwhelming number of roles that women have to play these days, whether it's a mother, a wife, a career woman, for example, how do we then juggle all these things? Why did you start thinking about this as an issue, first of all?
The first thing is because I am playing many roles myself.
Yeah.
I think that's where we all start, right? Thinking about, should we do this? Should we do that? Should we become a career woman? Should we be a mother? Yeah, so from ourselves.
Yeah, a lot of times we feel that, if we have one thing, we have to give up the other. What's your take on that? For example, if I want to focus on my career, then I can't have a family. Do you think that's true?
Personally, I think initially when I first started out, I thought that was the case. Yeah, you either become a career woman and you have to give up motherhood or something, or you have to get married later. I think I really started with that because that was how society kind of like made it seem so, right? Yeah, but I think as I grew along the way and then I took a look at how my own life evolved, then I felt that no, it should not be a either or thing.
It's possible to actually strike a balance. I think, many of us have this mindset as well that, if we focus very much on one thing, then we shelve our plans, for example, to have a family. Let's talk about, the girls that you do encounter and how they've managed to see themselves, in the role of what they could be in the future. Do they even think about family? Do they think about motherhood, for example, versus a career? What's it been like in your experience?
They are teenagers. I think if they are listening to this, they'll be like, no, I don't think we are thinking about having kids at this point in time. Yeah, so definitely not really at this age.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, how we all have limited time and limited energy. So how then do we prioritize what we want? How can we start thinking about what's really important to us and then try and balance all of it instead of choosing just one thing?
I think we have to think about the life stages kind of idea, because it really depends on which time of our lives are we at right now, and then which one to take priority. And it doesn't mean that balance means everything must have equal amount of time. It doesn't mean that if you have 4 different roles means that it's 6 hours each, It doesn't work like that. I think that balance is not absolute like equality kind of stuff. Yeah, it's really a fine like give and take here and there to get a feel of what needs a little bit more time now, and then after that what else would need that kind of attention. Like I think one of the examples I was giving you earlier on when we were having this conversation about motherhood, right? So when you are first having a child, then at the very first few months of the baby, the infant's time, that's when you would need to pay a little bit more attention on that. Definitely everything else has to take a back seat, right? Yeah.
So in a way, it's really very dependent on the stage, that you're at. I mean, especially if you just got married, maybe you spend more time with your husband, building a relationship. Course, So in terms of, let's talk about motherhood, because that's something, you have two children as well. They're both 8 and 10.
8 and 10,
right?
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about how you made that transition at the start, because as you said, initially you thought that if you had a family, you have to give up on your career. How has that worked out for you?
When I first started out, I really thought about, how everything has to be in a very fixed kind of way. So actually, how I thought then was very different from now. So the way I planned my especially my second child, was actually during the time when I was doing my part-time studies for counselling.
Wow, so juggling work, studies, and a new child.
Yeah.
Wow.
But how I did it was that I planned my maternity leave during a time when I was actually doing my studies. So I did not have to go to work. I could do my assignments and I could take care of my baby.
Okay, so it seems like it really is about planning your time very well. At that time, how did you manage your priorities? Because I think maybe, especially for new mothers, or career women who find that achievement and progression in career is really important, they might feel guilty either way, because if I take time away from my career to take care of my child, how do you manage with that kind of guilt or that kind of that conflict that women have sometimes?
That guilt, actually, I think that most women will have it, and it doesn't really absolutely go away.
Yeah, it's part of being a woman.
I think so, and part of being a mom, and especially when we are in this kind of generation with the culture that the women, at least from our parents' generation, usually think that we should be at home taking care of the kids and not really out at work, right? So there's that kind of mentality that we have to deal with. Hence, the guilt is a lot stronger, I think. So there is really this whole process of getting into a different paradigm shift, which is one of the other things I feel very strongly about, that it should not be we have to handle everything by ourselves. It has to be something in partnership with the people around us, not just with the spouse, with our bosses, with our family, parents, and so on.
I think you're right in the sense that a lot of women these days, tend to feel like they have to be the superwoman. You have to excel in everything. You have to be the best mom. You have to be the best wife, the best career woman. And a lot of times, it's what you're saying, Michelle, is that we don't have to give up anything, but we can ask for help. We can actually ask people to be part of that process for us, and we don't have to be so hard on ourselves sometimes. Let's talk a bit about how exactly we can do that in just a bit. My guest today is Michelle Koay. She's a counsellor at RGS, and she's sharing today about how women can juggle various roles they play, whether it's at work or at home with the family. If you're not a woman, you still can play your part in helping your loved ones, whether it's your wife or anyone in your life that you care about. So stay tuned on Between Us. We'll continue in just a bit. Chatting about how women can juggle various roles they play today, how to be superwoman without really killing yourself in the process. Michelle Koay is my guest today, and she's a counsellor at RGS, working extensively with young girls as well, which is probably why this matters so much to you, Michelle. Tell us a bit about being, for moms, for the career mom right now who feels that, okay, I have a new child or I have a child to take care of, but I don't want to give up opportunities at work. How did you start managing that? Are there examples you can give us?
One of the first things would be to think about the community, how we can make use of those resources around us. And when I say resources, it doesn't mean like food and water, not that kind of resources, but actually human resources, people around us. So, like for example, working with our extended family, or our immediate family, our parents, and that's where they can come into play too.
Especially with childcare, I suppose, when you're starting transition, away from your job or into taking care of the children, the family can actually be a very important part. Tell us a bit about what you think in terms of managing your time and your resources, because sometimes moms come back from work and they feel extremely exhausted from spending a whole day managing co-workers and their tasks. So how can we still have the energy and the time to be very actively involved in our children's lives?
When you talk about that, the first thing that comes to mind is to have enough sleep.
Everyone, that's a luxury these days.
But I think that's absolutely important, actually. That's like the first thing, right? When you have enough sleep on a regular basis, then you're actually more functional at work and also at home. But also the other thing that we were talking about earlier on about the children, how we can actually ask them to help us along the way too. Because okay, when they are very, very young, maybe they won't be able to do very much, but as they grow older, there are little tasks that they can help out at home as well.
Oh, interesting. The idea that we have to involve the family as well. We don't have to do everything. We're going to talk a bit about how women, can learn to let go sometimes about all these expectations and, being perfect mom, perfect wife. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But are there examples of how you've managed to do that? Get your children as well to help out with, chores perhaps, or, help out and pull some weight in the family so you don't get burnt out?
Oh, most definitely. Actually, they do help out at home. And I started them since they were really young with small little tasks that's really easy enough. Of course, the most basic one is putting away their toys. But as they grew older, things like folding the clothes or even my younger boy loves helping out to clean the floor.
Wow.
But I must say that it is not so clean. I usually have to do it another time. But I think the fact that, they are willing to help and, enthusiastic to kind of like take off that burden and load from me is really very encouraging. And so that's some of the things that they do.
Definitely. And maybe a lot of frustration and stress that a lot of mothers or, wives have is perhaps the idea that they're in it alone. They're trying to manage everything by themselves and they don't feel that anyone else really cares or appreciates what they do. So we're also going to find out more about what the rest of the family or the loved ones or co-workers can do as well to help you feel, I guess, a little bit more like you're not going to burn out. And that on some level, it's a team effort. That you can ask for help if you want to manage everything.
If I can squeeze in one thing, actually, it's not just about the practical kind of help, like household chores. The other thing also that the children miraculously sometimes can do is to provide that kind of emotional support too.
Even children?
Oh yes, of course, because there are times when you have a hard day at work, rather than lashing out at them, actually sometimes it's to ask them for a hug. And that really works.
Right, definitely. We're going to find out more tips from Michelle as well about the simple ways, simple tweaks you can make in your life really to help you juggle, if you're a woman, the various roles you have to play, whether you're a wife, a mom, or a co-worker. All this coming up in just a bit on Between Us. Michelle Koay is an RGS counsellor and she'll share more in just a bit.
Always just between us, all right?
Chatting with my guest today, Michelle Koay, who's RGS counsellor. She's been sharing so far about how women can juggle various roles we play, whether at work, at home, or in the family. And Michelle, you were talking earlier about how sometimes the key just lies in women letting go of all the expectations, sometimes maybe unrealistic expectations we have of ourselves to be the perfect mom, the perfect colleague. So what are some ways, we can go about having more positive mindset about it so we can stop feeling so pressured and tired all the time? What do you think?
The first thing that comes to mind actually is we have to let go of this mummy's voice. Yeah, because I feel that, for us especially, our first reflection of what we want to be as a woman actually comes from our mother, right? So lots of expectations come from there. And that's why I usually use this term called we have mummy issues. I think all women have mummy issues. And it's really growing out of that in a way. What we want to use for ourselves that is helpful, the mummy voice that's in our head that's really helpful for us, and what is not so helpful when it comes to lots of like criticism and harshness. I think sometimes we are very hard on ourselves,
right.
And that's why we want to do so much. There's so much expectations that we have on ourselves because of all that harsh voices.
So it's really about tapping on the positive things that you like about what mom expects and what you've seen, what you've seen yourself modeled after your mom, but at the same time letting go of the harshness, letting go of the bad things. In terms of, being in partnership with people, with men perhaps at work, or whether it's with a husband at home or with the rest of your family, what are some specific ways we can incorporate in the help of others to help us alleviate some of the stress and the burden?
I think in a workplace, one of the best things to have is a very good working relationship with the people around us, whether is it our co-workers or our bosses, because if they do have an understanding of where we come from, right, they know our professionalism at work, and they also have respect for us, and we in turn have respect for them as well in the way that they work and that kind of trust that they have that we would do our job well, right? Then you would be able to have that kind of relationship with them. Very, very good working relationship. This other thing you mentioned just now, this letting go part, I think plays a big part too, because there is one of my co-workers who's actually younger than me, and sometimes I feel that I have to be the one doing everything, that comes to my mind every now and then. I just have to remember that I'm not that superwoman. And so sometimes I really have to let go and let her have a chance. And the reason why it is an important thing to give her that opportunity to also do some of the types of work that I have to do when I'm not around, and to trust her that she can do it, is actually a way of empowering her as well.
Definitely. Sometimes in our worrying, we think that, we're doing it better. Or it's the best situation. If I'm helping her do it, it's for the best. But sometimes it really is counterproductive, because not only does the person feel micromanaged perhaps, or like they're not living up to expectation, you are also putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do the jobs of so many different people. So letting go is the first step. What are some experiences that you've had, Michelle? I mean, you mentioned off air when we were chatting just now that when you first had your children, it was quite frustrating on the work front because you felt a little bit like you were held back because you had kids. What was that whole phase like for you, and how did you overcome that?
I think at that point in time, I felt like the whole world was against me. Oh, now I'm having kids, and so I'm not going to be as productive. Everybody is going to think that I can't do my work as well. And so there is a lot of that negativity inside, which I think other people may have felt it in a way that I talk to them. So I may not have been as pleasant in a way, and maybe that bitterness and that grudgingness, oh, now the whole world is against me, and that's not really helpful at all. But like what we were talking about just now off air, about how retrospectively when I look at it now, if I had been a lot more positive in the way that I approached this whole matter, and how I saw the other people, that they are not in competition with me or they are against me, but more that we are all trying to work together in that kind of a working environment, and we would be able to build something more positive together.
I like this example because I think, many women can identify the frustration sometimes, because deep down perhaps there is that insecurity we have that when I have 2 more kids to look after, maybe my job, my work will suffer, and then we kind of make that manifest itself because we have that fear and we have the insecurity. So Michelle, you're saying in retrospect now, that the mindset is very important. How you view your opportunities, your colleagues, that's a really, really good start. We're going to talk a little bit more as well about building the next generation, how we can tell our young children, our young girls, as they're growing up with us, what is a good and healthy way to shape their sensibilities about the roles that women play, and how to have a healthy idea of what they can achieve, and, how they should be happy and fulfilled at the same time. Michelle Koay is my guest today. She's an RGS counsellor, and she's telling us more about women and how we can juggle the various roles we play in the family and at work. Between Us will continue in just a bit, so stay tuned.
Reset your relationships in Between Us. Counter is always just between us on 938 Live.
Moving to our final segment of Between Us today, chatting about how women can strike a great balance between the various roles they play and all the demands that, they put on themselves sometimes. Michelle Koay is my guest today, and she's a counsellor with RGS. Now, Michelle, let's talk a little bit about how we can empower young women these days, because you work so closely with them on a daily basis. What are some of the struggles you notice that, young women tend to have with regard to identity or the roles that they have to play, or achievement? What have you noticed?
Like what we all talked about, that they tend to put too much emphasis on all the things that they need to achieve in their lives, that they need to be everything, really superwoman, which doesn't exist.
What do you tell them when, there's so much pressure that sometimes there's a meltdown or they feel, depressed? How do you encourage them to kind of snap out the mentality for a bit?
I usually would say, just pause and take a few steps back. And sometimes when you're looking at yourself from the outside, it's a little bit easier. When you're really all inside, you think that you have to do every single thing, and it gets really overwhelming. So it's really stepping out a little bit. That helps.
Right. It's always easy to solve someone else's problems. So taking a third person perspective might help a little bit. Reflection and introspection, I suppose. And on a final note, for all the women listening, or even for the men as well who are supporting a lot of women, loved ones in their lives, what are some concrete steps they can take immediately to kind of help themselves alleviate the stress, kind of help with juggling the roles, striking that balance? What would you say?
Well, I think the first thing is to really take a look at ourselves, like what I mentioned just now. Just pause for the time being, and then take a look at yourself. What are the things that you want to do for yourself? How do you see yourself? And then after that, take reference from the mother, which I think really is a very important part as well, because there's a lot of influence there. What she has, the different expectations that she has on you as a daughter. And then I would say that if you have time, is to read this particular book by Sheryl Sandberg. There's Lean In. Yeah, it's a really good book that I felt she talked about her own experiences, and also how to deal with her juggling of being a mother and also a career woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Great tips there from my guest today. Michelle Koay is a counselor with RGS, and Michelle's been sharing how we can all strike a great balance, as women with the various roles that we play. Michelle, as always, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
This has been Between Us on 938 Live. I'm Angela Lim. Thank you